We are about to embark on an immersive journey through the corridors of our minds. Stand by as we prepare for departure.
Welcome aboard, everyone, to the Productivity with Peace of Mind podcast adventure. Our journey will begin in just a moment. Inhale deeply and exhale. Our voyage takes us on a captivating tour, diving deep into the intricate layers of our thoughts and imagination. Brace yourselves for the complexities of our evolution. For a safe and enjoyable journey, stay seated, secure your helmet and protective goggles, and keep hands, feet, and legs inside while the ride is moving. Now relax and enjoy.
What if I told you that there's actually no path that's perfectly safe or guaranteed? Like working the 9 to 5 is not necessarily any safer than following an entrepreneurial journey. So why not just pick the path and follow the path that lights you up and means the most to you? Today, we're meeting with a good friend and serial entrepreneur who has amazing lessons he has learned along the way that he is sharing with us today. Today, we have with us Brooke Pfautz, founder of Vintory, the only sales and marketing agency in the vacation rental industry dedicated to helping property managers grow their own businesses and inventory. There are a lot of risks and rewards of a path fueled with so much passion and purpose like you've done, Brooke. And I'm just so excited to have you on the show because, like I was telling you before we got started, like you have just accomplished so much. And I know within that there's a lot of lessons and learnings. And so I know you have so much to just offer in the sense of wisdom and what we can learn from your journey.
Yeah, well, Lindsay, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I don't know if I've had a lot of successes. I've also had probably a 10x more failures along the way. Someone once said they call them serial entrepreneurs because it's more like a serial killer. You usually end up killing a lot of the business, and I feel like I've had my share of failures too. So.
Yeah, well, and I think it's really important to know that like the fastest way to figure out what does work is to figure out all the things that don't work as quick as possible, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, you learn from your mistakes, and that's actually why I actually wrote a book called Vacational Secrets, where I interviewed 52 of the top leaders in our industry, and I asked them to share their top 10 mistakes, and it was amazing. The parallels with that, with not only just the short-term vacational industry, but any industry, and not only that, so out of 520 mistakes, really there was only 10 when it all came down to it. So we've all made the same 10 mistakes, and you could really take a lot of those mistakes, like I said, and the parallels go into any vertical, any industry.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, it's really cool to just be able to like see across the board all of those journeys and then distill it down to like, okay, here's the pattern and here's what we can all learn from, which is super cool. Do you have like any that come to mind that you think are like just really stood out to you?
Well, I mean, the first one is always around team, because really, if you think about it, what is a business? A business is just the collection of a bunch of people. Unless you have some kind of crazy IP or you have some kind of crazy patent or something like that, the actual value of a company comes down to that team. So there's lots of struggles with the team, like getting the right team together, hiring too slow, firing too slow. A lot of things that really came down to team. And again, I see that with any industry, any business. I've been fortunate enough to be in multiple verticals, and it just seems to be no matter what, the common thread is usually your team.
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge. And that's one of the things that really stood out to me when you and I first connected because, as I learned about what you were doing and your company and your team, like it was just profound the way that everyone was so engaged and like passionate and really like behind you and what you were doing and building. And I think that's just something so amazing about what you can do in business is like really get that buy-in from your team and also support them in a way that they're super excited to show up for you every day.
Well, I don't know if it's me. I think it's more of the mission than anything else.
Yeah.
There's a gentleman named Ben Horowitz who had a quote, and I'll paraphrase here. If I get it right, it said something about he was a co-founder of Andreessen Horowitz, which is one of the top VC firms, and he says nothing motivates a great employee more than a mission that's so important that it supersedes everyone's personal ambition. So hopefully you can get you have a company, you have an idea, you have a business that is something like that where they can be really passionate about it and they're doing it. I mean, think of, say what you will about Elon Musk, but the people that go work for his companies, like whether it be Tesla or SpaceX, I mean, they're changing the world. They are doing things that are, that they thought were impossible. So
Yeah.
they're doing it really for that mission. And then that's the motivation that they need a lot of times. So hopefully if you as a leader can kind of paint that vision, you can have that, that BHAG, that big, hairy, audacious goal, and you can kind of assemble a team together and kind of pull them. It's you don't need to motivate them too much as long as you get like a good work environment.
Yeah, so cool. I love that. And that's, kind of where you've reached now is like this level of the certain level of success, right? But let's go all the way back for a second to when you stepped away from your career and decided to pursue entrepreneurship. What did that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, well, first off, I'm like I said, serial entrepreneur. I was always starting companies in high school and even middle school and college, and but I graduated college, ended up going into finance, went into mortgage banking, worked for a mortgage banking firm in the Baltimore area, and ended up getting my own store, really getting my own office. I was like a 23-year-old kid. I don't know what they were thinking. So from like 23 to 25, I ran my own office. And yeah, I made the decision. I was like, you know what, I could do this a heck of a lot better myself. I was a little bit naive, as a young kid, and went on my honeymoon and decided when I got back from my honeymoon, I was going to tell my boss and do whatever kind of transition time I needed to do that. Well, unfortunately, on my honeymoon, he found out that I was going to do this. And rather than kind of waiting for me to come back and have that conversation, he told me in the middle of my honeymoon. So I remember my wife was she was down at the pool drinking a lava flow, which is a combination of pina colada and strawberry daiquiri. And I came back and I said, because we didn't have cell phones at the time. We had to actually call from the room. And I came back and I told her, I said, well, congratulations, honey. You just married a unemployed guy. So yeah, but got back from the honeymoon and started that first venture, and it was a mortgage banking firm, and it was me just and a handful of people. Most of them were my friends, and yeah, that ended up building that business to one of the largest mortgage banking operations in the DC, Baltimore operate in the area, and yeah, thought that was going to be my career forever, and then 2007 hit, and lost everything. So I'm sure we'll probably talk about some of those challenges later.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that must be such it's like it makes me think of like a roller coaster drop of like a moment, right? Of like when you have this plan, you're like, okay, I'm gonna transition out. I'm gonna take my time. I'm gonna be thoughtful and intentional. And then he's like, okay, bye. You're like, whoa, wait a second, right?
Yeah.
But I can imagine that kind of catapults you into that, action and motivation to then make it happen because it's kind of become sink or swim.
Yeah, I mean, it's pulling off the band-aid. You have no choice.
Yeah.
You just got to go. You got to go as fast as you can, and that's the way it was. Where it might have been a 1 month, 3 month, 6 month, start. Um, and I guess there's pros and cons to each, but there's nothing better than just kind of jumping in and doing it and learning. And the fear of and the motivation of fear and is 10x what the motivation of fame or success for sure. So at this point, newly married and didn't have a job, didn't have much in savings, and here is like, look, I have no choice but to build this thing, and luckily we did, and it was a very successful company for about 8 years, and here I was in my 20s and early 30s making more money than I ever thought I would. I mean, I was 1 year I made over $1 million in a year. I never thought in that kind of time frame I would be doing something like that, but was able to, and again thought that was going to be my journey forever. And like life has a way of, kind of shoving you and, bringing you back down. And it's probably a good thing. Maybe it kind of humbled me a little bit more. I mean, like I said, I don't think a 20-year-old or 20 something year old should be making that kind of money. And, it probably did change my trajectory. Maybe I would have been a completely different person if I was continued at that success at that young of an age. Who knows? So maybe God has a way of humbling you, and He has a path for you, and that's I guess what happened.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about those challenges. What was that like to have that taken away again?
Oh yeah, I mean it was awful. I mean it happened so rapidly. That was the thing too. So
Mm,
here I'm at like the top of the world. I'm
yeah.
30 years old and making more money like I said than I thought I'd ever make. I had 100 employees. I had I was on the front page of the LA Times. I was the front page Baltimore Sun. I was on NBC Nightly News. Like I had like what I thought was the top of the world. And bought the beach house, bought the Porsche, like joined the country club, built a custom home and thought I was living the life that I was going to live. And then like I said, in a very short period of time, like when Lehman Brothers and all those companies kind of failed in the secondary mortgage market, we had no place to sell all of our mortgages. So I very rapidly, had to pivot. Luckily, I was, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, but I was the power of network. A couple
Mhm.
years earlier, I joined a company or an organization called Young Presidents Organization, YPO, and a
Mhm.
gentleman that was in my group, really helped me. And he came to me and said, "Hey, Brooke, I'm reading the same headlines you're reading. I don't think the mortgage business is getting any better here. This point, we were trying to sell the company, we're trying to merge, we were doing everything we could." And he said, I've got an idea to start a vacation rental company, and I want you to run it. It's your company. You can be president. You can be CEO. I'll put the money into it to fund it, and let's go build something special." And so I never thought I would. I mean, I remember going back to him. I'm like, "You realize I've never, ran a vacation rental company before." I said the only no experience I have is I stayed in a vacation rental once. So it's so it was one of those things where, but he goes, "Brooke, you're an entrepreneur. You're a smart guy. The entrepreneurs figure stuff out." And that was it. So that was October 1st, 2007. And we launched a company called Vantage Resort Realty, and ended up growing it to probably one of the fastest growing vacation rental companies in the history of the short-term rental industry. And that got me into the career of short-term rentals, which I've been doing now for 17 years, and one way or another, and absolutely love it.
That's so cool. And I know you and I have talked pretty extensively about how even though like you're never really arriving, right? So there's always this kind of up and down, process. And yet it's always worth it. Like you knew in your heart that like this was this was your path. So tell us about that. Like how did you know that even though it had its dips and difficulties and challenging times, how did you know that it was still your path?
Well, and I don't know if I knew it at the time, because it was, when you go from that kind of level of, success and money and everything else, and, it's like looking back on it, like, I don't think I would have done it any other way.
Yeah.
But it's, like, so it reminds me of the quote by, I think it's by Emerson. It's not the destination, it's the journey. Right. And, I feel like I was fortunate enough many years ago to do an Ironman triathlon, and I remember, and when I started, I didn't know how to even like swim one lap in the pool, but I remember someone coming to me and saying, "Brooke, look," and that they were ahead of me. They already did an Ironman triathlon, and they said, "Brooke, it's not about like yes, you've got this goal, of finishing it, but like you're going to feel empty almost at the end of it, because
Mhm.
it's all about the journey. It's all about those the training and setting the goal and doing and working with a team and like having a coach and doing joint runs and rides along the way, and so it's like don't get so caught up in that end goal of finishing. Yeah, of course you want to do that. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
But at the same time, don't forget, to have fun along the way, because otherwise you're going to feel pretty empty, once you're actually finished, without those memories of doing it. And some of the greatest memories, I think
Mm.
it's one of those goals I think I set. And, just looking back on it, like all the little things that had to happen to achieve that goal are, pretty amazing. And just, I love that journey of, just breaking down one big goal into a bunch of whole series of other little, steps along the way.
Yeah. Well, and what a important lesson. I think so many people miss that point of enjoying the journey. So what a gift that he gave you to like slow down and really like kind of, take it all in as you were
Hmm.
going. That's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, and honestly, there's a lot of parallels with business. It's, set the big, hairy, audacious goal, and then, work backwards. I'm a big fan of, the Japanese art of Kaizen, small incremental bites. So, doing
Yep.
a something like that, like a Ironman triathlon is pretty daunting. But if you break it down into tiny little bite-sized pieces, it's actually pretty easy. So, and my analogy for this, and I'm overstating it just to make a point, but you get the idea. It's like, all right, step one, it's like research running shoes. Okay. Step two, find a store you want to buy your running shoes. Step three, buy running shoes. Step four, put on running shoes and stand on the treadmill for 30 seconds. The next day, walk on the treadmill for 1 minute. You get the idea. And then it's like, okay, sign up for a 5K, sign up for a 10K, sign up for the sprint triathlon. Like, just break it down into these tiny little bite-sized pieces. And it's like that daunting task is actually pretty easy. And going back to the initial thing I talked about with, the parallels of businesses, it's like, okay, setting the goal, working backwards, using the Japanese art of Kaizen, surround yourself with a really good team, because you can't do it yourself. You need a coach, you need obviously a support system, you need, Sherpas at the races, you need my wife was instrumental in this, thinking about it. Like, I mean, go for a 10-hour bike, on a Saturday, go for a 4-hour run on Sundays, like you need that support system to kind of take care of the
Yeah.
kids and everything else. And then also you still got to work your ass off. You really still
Yeah.
have to like work really, really hard. And there's
Yeah.
gonna be times when things come up and it's not going to go as planned. It's going to be, you needed to get that long run in, and it's a tornado with, warning outside, and you got to adapt. And so it's just like business. Again, the parallels are uncanny. With those any kind of distance race. I think like marathons or ultra marathons or triathlons. With the business world.
Yeah, I want to highlight something you said that I think is really cool and like a big part of this podcast is like you said when you break it down so small, it actually becomes easy. And it's not so daunting anymore. And like that's such a theme in what we talk about here because there is actually a way to make it easy and
Mhm.
feel so much easier because I think like what makes it so difficult is like our mind, right? Where it's that seeing that whole big picture and thinking, "Oh my gosh, how could I ever do all of that?" Right? It's like looking at a whole mountain and thinking, I can't just like climb that, you know? But when you're like, take a few steps. I can do that. That's easy.
Yeah, right.
So I love that you said
Well,
that.
yeah, and again, going back to the business, like we obviously have our 5-year vision. We've got our 1-year goals. We run on EOS. We've got our 90-day rocks. And then what I do, just kind of breaking that down one step further, is I start every day with what I call my 6 things. And my
Mm,
6 things, and I start the day every single day, and I go and I look at my annual goal, I look at my 90-day rocks, and I just write down what's one tiny little thing that gets me closer to that goal. And sometimes it's silly. It's just like I said, the analogy of researching running shoes. It could be something like make a phone call, send an email, and it's that traction, it's that momentum that keeps you going. And then I do that and I have 6 things, and I write it down, and I will not leave for the day until I do those 6 things. But here's what happens. Like your day gets filled up with other stuff, right? Like
yeah.
you could sit there and send. And the reason I kind of did this was at the end of the day, I would sit down and I would look, and I was busy. I mean, I was running, I was on the phone all day long, I was sending emails all day, like I was, solving problems with my team. But at the end of the day, I was like, did I actually accomplish anything that got me any closer to those big, rocks? And usually 9 out of 10 times I didn't. So
Mm,
here, as long as I'm doing my 6 things,
yeah.
I know I'm getting one step closer to those larger goals. And I found it's been a habit for me, and it's so funny because as I hear like EOS, I hear, you know, um, Keller's, the one thing, like all these different books and strategies. There's a lot of parallels with those, and like Stephen Covey and everything else. So it's just kind of it's a framework that's worked pretty well for me. So hopefully that's helpful for you and any of your listeners.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I think breaking things down it and I love your examples too, because I think sometimes we think like, oh yeah, we can break it down, but we don't maybe break it down that simple. But it's unbelievable, like you said, the traction that we get when it's like
Hmm.
make a phone call or send an email and you're like, oh, that's not going to do anything. But then you do
Yeah.
that and then the ball gets rolling and then you go to the next thing, right? And all of a sudden you've made progress.
Yep. Well, compounds, right? It's
Yeah.
like, it's this is like telling a joke without saying the punchline, but I remember hearing that story. It's like if you get a penny every day and you double it, and before you know it, you've got like a couple $1 million by the end of the month. So just that compounding nature is pretty powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And now you're running Vintory.
Yep.
So you mentioned being in the, vacation rental space. So tell us, like, how did you come to Vintory? How did that piece of it come together?
Oh my gosh. So I'll try to keep this as simple as possible because it's a long story. But so again, yeah, I started Vantage Resort Realty, grew that company 0 to 500 properties in 5 years, sold that company in 2013, ended up going to work for the largest property manager down in Orlando. I was chief business development officer for them for 5 years. So it was really focused on growth and growing inventory, growing the supply, the properties under management, and then ended up going to work for a software company for 2 years called LiveRes, based out of Boise, Idaho. And that's when I fell in love with software. And I realized that, hey, there is something here. And, it's this whole, it scales infinitely, and, bits versus atoms, can scale. And I was speaking at a couple conferences about, and again, these are very niche, short-term rental industry kind of conferences. But somehow my niche became inventory growth. I was like the inventory guy because that company Vantage growing from 0 to 500 was pretty rare. And like I said, I think it was probably one of the fastest companies in our space to ever do that. So I kept on getting people asking me to help them, and like, doing consulting, and I probably could have made a nice career in just consulting and going, from one place to the next and charging $10,000 for a couple of days to help them build out a plan that did this. But when I went to LiveRes, I saw the power of software. I said, hey, how can I build a company that scales much bigger than me? Because I knew there was only a select number of companies that could actually, afford if I were to do this on a consulting basis.
Yeah,
And it's only me, and it's just I'd be on the
yeah,
road all the time. So I figured, how can I create a software platform that does that and gives you 90% of me, but for 10% of the price.
yeah.
And that was kind of why I launched Vintory, was to build a data software platform that actually did that.
That's so cool that you were able to kind of pull together like what you enjoyed doing and what you were really good at for like that long-term success. Cause like, like you said, anyone could jump after like, oh yeah, I could go get, 10K here, 10K there, but is that sustainable? And is that how I want to spend my time? I don't know, right?
Yep. Yeah, no, it's like I've always said, finding the intersection of what you're really good at
Yeah.
and what you love to do. And it's so funny because I usually actually use that question, or statement, I guess, when I'm actually, it is a question when I'm interviewing people. And I say, hey, like, where is the intersection? If you look back in your career, where was the intersection where you were doing exactly what you absolutely loved? Like you jumped out of bed every single morning, and, at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. or whatever it was, or maybe it's even 7 a.m., you jumped out of bed and you're like, I love going to work. Where was that? And then, but it was at the intersection of what you were really good at. And if I
Yeah.
can find that with my team, and I think we've done a pretty good job of it, I've been successful as a CEO, as a founder of a company. And that's really, I mean, if you think about it, my job is relatively easy. It's two things. It's kind of setting the vision and the strategy, and it's hiring, recruiting, and building a great team and nurturing that team. That's it. Because again, going back to what we started with, like if you have a really, really good team, like no matter what, I guess unless you have some crazy IP and some crazy, patent or something like that, or, monopoly, Like
Yeah.
that is the value of your business, and they will solve the problems that are thrown out to you. And the difference between an A player and a B player, it's not just incremental, it is like 10x. So that's where I spend the majority of my time is again on that recruiting and building and developing, the team.
Yeah. And I think you say that it's easy, right? And I think that that's coming from a place of like now having so much experience in that and having also, I would tend to guess like a natural knack for the people piece as well. But it's not easy for everybody. And so just to give, some kind of notes to that is that now it's easy that you've kind of followed this path to get there, right? Would you say?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a good point. It's 30 years of mistakes,
Yeah, yeah.
um, and screwing it up many, many times that now it is kind of, I don't want to say easy, but it's second nature because
Yeah.
that's what I need to focus on. That's my thing. And when I say easy, it's just, I mean it more so in the back, like this is what I need to focus on. It's just simply these two things.
Yes. Right. And those are the muscles that you've built through your years of experience.
And mistakes, yes.
Yeah. 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 Right. Yeah. We build it by figuring out what doesn't work, right?
Scar tissue, right? Yeah.
That's right. Lots of scar tissue. Oh, that's so cool. And and then you were able to like bring your values into that, which also I just think is so cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so funny. So a good friend of mine, Steve Schwab, he's the CEO of Casago, which they just bought Vacasa. So if you know anything about short-term rentals, Vacasa is now the largest, or Casago/Vacasa is now the largest short-term vacational management company in the U.S., if not the world. And Steve is a really good friend of mine. He is a former Army Ranger, and he did something that I thought was really interesting. And he built up this company from scratch, from nothing. He actually launched it in Mexico, and what he realized was as he started scaling into different markets, the team would not necessarily kind of follow what he did. And he was like, wait a sec, like, how am I ever going to possibly scale this if I can never scale, if I can never grow outside of one market, And, he had this one gentleman who did something and he thought he was doing the company a service by, um, and I forget the exact story, but it was like, he pretty much ended up taking an extra like $500 from a guest or an owner, and save the company, $500. And Steve was just appalled because he said, no, that's not the right thing to do. And he said, like, how am I going to scale this business into, hundreds of markets and things like that? So he really broke down his principles and, there, or some people call, values. And that became he actually wrote a small little book out of it. He made it into an acronym. It's called his Orange Credo. Um, and every single day the team gets together, no matter how big, how small, and they actually go over the credo and they pick a letter of the acronym of Orange and they go over kind of one of those core principles. And he realized that this came back from his Army Ranger days, where that's why they were able to, scale. It's like in the absence of information, you need to fall back on something. And actually we have, one of our core values is an autonomous team, and I'll read this to you. So we trust and empower our team to make independent decisions based on our core values and support them even if they're wrong. So the idea is, like, we want our team to be autonomous. We want them to make these decisions. We want them to do things. But if they're unsure, if they're unsure of what decision to do, always fall back to the core values, because those are kind of like those guiding principles, that guiding light that will always be there. And just to give you some of our core values, we are hyper partner focused. So we call our customers partners. So we hold the partner tightly, we hold the problem tightly, we hold the solution loosely. We work with integrity. We favor being humble. We win as a team, we lose as a team. The star of the team is the team. And we're continuously innovating. We live in permanent beta, and we have a bias for action. Slow down the big decisions, speed up the rest. And we have a couple others which I won't bore you with. But the idea is, if you don't know what to do, and you need to make a decision, just fall back to the core values. If you fall back to the core values and you make a decision based on that, I'm not going to be mad at you if it was the wrong decision. And that's why we kind of make that statement on the autonomous team, you know?
Well, yeah, and it empowers your team to think for themselves because when you talk about scalability, if your team's always relying on you, how scalable is that?
Exactly. Yeah, you can't scale, and exactly, and it's another reason why we have something. It's called, and I stole this from HubSpot and Netflix. I think it's called a culture deck. So every single team member, doesn't matter where they are, doesn't matter what position, I get sit and meet with them for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I go over our culture deck. And it's just to make it really clear. And I realized in the early days, like, in the early days, it was easy because everyone reported to me. I was on, 4 hours of Zooms with them a day. Like it was pretty easy to kind of get what was in my head and my thoughts and my vision out there. But as we scaled and grew and we had managers, and we have managers and managers and managers and managers and managers, which is kind of crazy for a small company,
Mhm.
a relatively small company, I kind of lost touch. I don't interact with these people. So that's why I made it a very important, very critical to kind of go over the core values with everybody, the culture deck with everybody, and just explain exactly what we do, our vision, our strategy, our values, so they can't really come back to me and say, well, Brooke, I didn't know that, because every single person had gone through that culture deck.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's so cool to have that one thing or that core set of things to fall back on, to know that like this is who we are, this is what we stand for, versus like you said, or well, like I didn't know, or I didn't know, which way to go. It's I think anytime we have values, whether it's for a company or ourselves, it makes decision making so much simpler.
Yeah. Yep. It's a guiding light, and when you're stuck with there's usually sometimes the decisions that end up coming bubbling up to me, and I can only imagine if you're like the president of the United States or something at a much bigger organization, but the decisions, even for my tiny little company, the decisions that come up to me, that bubble up to me, it's because the people below me couldn't make it. They couldn't figure out how to make the decision, or there was no right answer. It was that you're torn between two wrong decisions, two bad decisions, and you've got to, and so what I've always used, the framework I've always used, is when in doubt, just fall back to your core values and let those be your guiding light.
Yeah, amazing. And speaking of guiding lights, I know you've talked about and you've mentioned a little bit your wife, but you've talked about how she's just been like an incremental role um, in this process and in this journey, kind of supporting you and the family and your kids and everything along the way too.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would obviously not be out here without her. She's
Mhm.
incredible, and it's we had, we made some tough decisions, so when I started Vantage, it was 3 hours away, in a town we didn't live in, so
Mhm.
luckily we had a vacation property, not too far away. So every Monday I'd get in my car at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. and I'd drive down to Ocean City and I'd, work there Monday through Friday and I'd come back, so while she was taking care with the two small girls at the time. And then I did that for 5 years. So she was pretty much a single mother, for
Mhm.
5 years. Now there was, if there was key events, birthdays and plays and things like that, obviously I would stay home and I would make those 90% of them. But and then when I sold Vantage, I was in Orlando. I had this incredible opportunity to a great position to, run one of the largest management companies in the world and one of the most respected, and it was in Orlando, and we talked about it and we decided it was actually more disruptive to the family to move to Orlando.
Mhm.
And it was, think about it, it was no different, me jumping on a plane, Southwest Airlines for 2 hours than me driving to Ocean City for 3 hours. It was the same exact concept. The only difference was it was, commuted versus Southwest, and I could actually get some work done on the plane.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a 10-year period there, a 10-year stretch that, she was raising the girls, Monday through Friday by ourselves. And, it's tough. It wasn't great. I missed a lot of their childhood. But I was present when I came home on the weekends, and, we've got a great relationship, but, yeah, it was, I don't know how I would have done that without her, for sure.
Mhm. Well, and also I want to call out what you're saying too is like you're giving these examples of like how the two of you made these decisions together, which is so cool to have that partnership at home as well, not just in the business, right? Of like, okay, what really is the best for our family and how do we want to move forward, which is amazing.
Yeah, no, I mean everything. It's a team. We're a team, right? It's a family decision. It's not me making that decision. It's not her making that decision. We collectively decided what's the best for the team. In this case, the family.
Mhm. That's huge. And your girls are now setting out on their own paths.
Yeah, yeah. I got one that's 23 and working. She graduated college, luckily early, and then yeah, so she's out there working now. And then my youngest, she's got one semester left at Penn State. So yeah, it's really cool to see them grow and mature. And they're in both of them are helpers. So my wife is a speech pathologist.
Mm.
Obviously a helper, and both my girls are kind of following in the footsteps of their mother with those kind of decisions. So really, they're uh, proud of them, and well, didn't guide them, didn't push them into any one way. I did not want them to be entrepreneurs. It didn't just whatever they wanted to do, they did. So we supported them on that journey, and glad we did. So.
That's beautiful. And even if there's not that like push, which is I agree, that's good not to like push to a path because I think that creates all kinds of other resistance and
Hmm.
resentment, all that. But I think having the influence of a father who is an entrepreneur and has had, like you said, many, scar tissue and many successes, like gosh, right in your home, like right there raising you like that must be so amazing for them to have that influence and the mother who is like that amazing teammate, the supporter, the caretaker, the speech pathologist. I mean, I have my own speech pathologist. I know how important they are.
Yeah, I mean it's maybe maybe they chose to do that because they saw what the life of an entrepreneur, and I think we sheltered them a little bit from it.
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
look, the highs are high, the lows are low, and I think
Mhm.
we softened that on either side. And and I'll massacre this, but it's something to the effect of like it's usually never as good as it seems, and it's usually never as bad as it seems.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of we softened the edges on when things were really really good, we didn't really let them know it was really really good, and where things were really really bad, we didn't let them know it was really really bad. You know what I mean? So they got to live a pretty normal, healthy, childhood. So yeah, and I think there's something in you touched on before, but I think there was a book that I read a long time ago, the top 5 regrets of the dying, where it
Mm.
talked about like one of the most common regrets was they didn't really live a life true to themselves. They
Mm.
did what the others expected of them. And I think as parents, we've done a good job of letting them do what they want to do, not necessarily what we want them to do.
Yeah. Well, and I think, looking at like every kind of path out there that we can take from corporate careers to entrepreneurship to all these different, paths that we can lay out for ourselves, right? There's risk in all of it. And none of it's guaranteed for either, consistent financial success or happiness. So we might as well
Yeah,
just follow that calling.
that is, you nailed it. Because I remember going through the journey of being an entrepreneur and just the challenges associated with it and how difficult it was. And then like losing a business is so hard. It's so hard on, financially, it's so hard on your ego and just
Mm.
mentally. But then I, have many friends that have worked at, corporate, Fortune 500 companies that got laid off. And it's, there's no security. Don't feel
Yeah.
like just, and because I did actually think that. I'm like, what am I
Yeah.
doing? Like I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna work for anybody else anymore. But and being the entrepreneur is not necessarily the riskiest endeavor. Sometimes it's actually the one you have the most control of because it is your control, unless outside factors like 2007 2008 financial crisis, we just imploded, or COVID, you know what I mean. So obviously there's some things that are just completely out of your control. And And that's actually a point that I've learned. It's, the only thing for certain, what we found is there will be a black swan event. There will be multiple black swan events in your career over your life. I mean, if I
Yeah.
just look in my journey, you know, um, you had the 9/11, September 11th. You had, which obviously for the short-term rental industry and just travel in general was challenging.
Yeah.
You had 2007, 2008 financial crisis. You had COVID, and then you even get like super kind of market like specific. So I've got a good friend, Angie Leone, who owned probably one of the most successful management companies in Maui. I mean, she had the most successful company, and businesses worth tens of millions of dollars. And overnight, literally a fire hit and wiped out all her inventory. I mean, just like
Mm.
that. So she went from having a multi-million dollar business to nothing overnight. And we have there's other stories of many other management companies where the same thing happened. So again, long-winded way of getting to, it's like the only thing for certain is black swan events will happen. You know.
Yeah. Right. And like, are you ready and prepared within yourself on how you want to handle that? And by that, I mean, like what we're talking about is like those values and, you know, having that, partnership with your, family or whoever it is that you're going through life with.
Yeah, you need that good support system. Kind of what I talked about with the Iron Man. That's a big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been so amazing, and I'm just always so like fascinated and intrigued with everything that you're doing and your story. And so I'm so glad that we get to share this with others, and you're just really helping us kind of, I think, bring together like how to trust that inner voice and pursue what lights us up, not what looks quote unquote safe because it's kind of a non-reality, right?
Yep.
And just go for it and just,
Yep.
trust and learn along the way of, how over time you figured out what you did like and you figured out what you were good at. And I think that gives us a lot to reflect on with our own journeys.
Well, yeah, you nailed it. You said it perfectly. So thanks for having me, Lindsay, and love to do this again sometime in the future.
Absolutely. That sounds great. So before I let you go, I want to have you leave whoever's listening to with one thing that you want them to walk away with knowing, considering, or to go do right after they're done listening.
I would say go out and focus on building out the team because again, you're only as strong as the team that you assemble.
Yes, absolutely. Amazing. Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you for braving the inside of your mind with me. The better we understand ourselves, the more deeply we understand the world, and as our awareness grows, life just gets better and better. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a review and share this with anyone else you think could benefit from listening. A quick reminder that the content shared in this podcast is for informational purposes only. I am not a licensed therapist, and the discussions here are not a substitute for professional advice. If you're dealing with a specific issue or need personalized guidance, please consult with a qualified professional. Your well-being is important, and this podcast is simply a platform for sharing insights and experiences. I appreciate you spending this time with me. Until next time.